These individuals then go to Parliament and swear an oath to the Queen instead of you. That's right. These representatives take your authority and use it to serve the Queen. The ministers in cabinet are there to minister to the Governor General, not the people. The ministers are advisors to the Governor General. As such, the Governor General is the head of the corporation. He or she is the chief executive officer, not the prime minister. The representatives are there to serve and protect the integrity and viability of the corporation. They are not there to serve and protect you. One of their highest duties is a principle called continuity of government. It may seem like they serve and protect the people, but in fact, those benefits and privileges are there to ensure your survival so that the flow of energy, control, and wealth will be maintained for their empire. After all, without people, the wealth, power, influence, and control that the corporation has would literally evaporate overnight. I would also suggest that the primary reason these individuals now end up being corrupted is because of all the power that we give them. The number of people on this planet who have the character to handle the consolidation of power from millions of people into the hands of one man are so rare it's not even worth entertaining. The people, by giving their power away, are directly responsible for the corruption of these individuals. These lost souls who value greed, power, and control have managed to infiltrate all levels of government under the premise that the crown or state is responsible for governing the quote-unquote public. What is the public anyway? By definition, public is defined as pertaining to the people of a country or locality. The source for that is Oxford Unabridged Dictionary, 1958. People means everyone. The moment you identify a single individual or group, or remove a single individual or group from the whole, then it is no longer the people, and by definition is no longer public. I would suggest that there has never been, nor ever will be, a government or nation in the history of this planet that has succeeded in governing the people. They have always strayed from their mandate in order to gain control, power, influence, or wealth. It is also important to point out that the public is considered a body politic, and as such is a fiction in its own right. The public is nothing more than a concept that is a fictional construct to group or describe people in the physical realm. Remember, all these concepts only exist in our minds. Technically, the people don't exist. It's only a matter of collecting a bunch of individuals into a group and placing a label on the group. When we do that, do we not diminish the individuals within that group? These concepts will never manifest into the physical or spiritual realm unless we allow it through our capacity to create. So any construct within the fictional realm absolutely is dependent upon man to keep it going. The moment the idea leaves our minds, it must disappear, for the minds of man is its creator in the fictional realm. That is how much power we have as individuals when it comes to dealing with the corporations and governments of the world. Guns may not bring down all governments, but ideas definitely could. This is simple in concept, but difficult in implementation. The challenge we all face is that there are literally billions of people who do not have the eyes to see or the ears to hear. They all believe that corporations and governments exist in the physical realm, and as such, we will continue to face challenges with the people within these organizations. After all, they have a huge vested interest in ensuring that these constructs continue to persist. They will do everything in their power to protect it. So, does it make sense then to protest against what the government is doing? Are we accomplishing our objectives if we march against some corporation for what they're doing to our air, food, water, plants, or animals? I believe that focusing on the fiction itself is feeding it life. The more time and energy we spend focusing on the constructs of others is, in fact, supporting and propagating those constructs. It gives it validity, so that when others observe the actions and behaviors of the individuals involved in the particular construct, they too can then engage their own imagination and join in on the illusion. That is how powerful our imagination really is. It is a necessary social skill that we have so that we can relate to one another. It allows us to form complex social bonds. What I'm suggesting is that we be consciously aware of those bonds, because there are people out there who are more than willing to take advantage of us should we choose to bond with them. Instead, perhaps focusing on the people rather than the fiction would be a much more productive use of our time and energy. Focusing on the physical rather than the fictional may be a more productive catalyst for change. The problem is that we have individuals engaged in parasitic behaviors who created these constructs called corporations, nations, countries, or United Nations so that they can convince others that their construct is the best way to provide prosperity and security for those involved. After all, that is what most of us want, right? We're all looking for peace, security, food, clothing, shelter, social interaction, rewarding lives, prosperity, and love. What better way than to do it together as a nation? In principle, I completely agree. The problem is that the current nations were set up on the foundation of consolidation of wealth, power, and control in the hands of the few, not prosperity, peace, and freedom for everyone. Can we change the current construct? I don't believe we can. The current constructs are so deeply embedded in our culture and supported by billions of people. It will take a mass awakening that the world has never seen before. Great disturbance of biblical proportions is required to break the grip of these fictional constructs. They were also created with control, power, and wealth collection as their core foundation. They are not actually broken, but rather they're working perfectly for their masters. The probability of fixing them is small because there's nothing to fix. What is required is that we use our imaginations to form new constructs to compete against these old parasitic constructs. I believe we can form new constructs with the proper intent and spirit that would vastly outperform the old paradigm. Through example, we can show others that there are new and better ways of living on this planet. The fictional realm is not good or bad. It is merely a tool, and we need to be consciously aware of how we're using that tool to ensure that others don't take advantage of us ever again. It's up to us to determine how it will serve us during our physical manifestation on this planet, rather than continuing to participate in a construct where we end up being the slaves to a fictional master. It is a matter of being consciously aware of what our mind is doing. Christ had a similar challenge that was described in Scripture. Again, the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain, and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. And the devil said unto him, All these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Then saith Jesus unto him, Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. Matthew 4:8-10. The word kingdoms, in context with the above passage, is the right to rule over the kingdom rather than ownership of the land or the people. The individuals wearing the corporation soul, called Pope, Crown, King, President, Governor General, etc., have all succumbed to this temptation. They have all succumbed to the glory, wealth, power, and greed that comes with the whole idea of governing kingdoms. I believe that this third temptation of Christ took place in his mind. I don't believe that the devil took physical form beside him to tempt him, but rather took fictional form in his own mind. The temptation was there that allowed him to contemplate the idea where he could easily take over the world, something that is clearly within the realm of the devil, temptation. However, Christ knew that the fictional realm is not real. He knew that he would not obtain his objective in the fictional realms. His job was to show people what the spiritual and physical realms were all about. He saw how lost everyone was within the fictional realm. I think what is important with this passage is to recognize that all that is required is the discipline to command the mind, rather than let the mind run rampant and be susceptible to these temptations. This is a very difficult process, and I believe that is part of why we are here. The mind is very powerful and requires discipline in order to consciously control it, to ensure this tool is used appropriately to reflect our intent and spirit. If we let the mind control and govern us, then we will end up being stuck in the fictional realm and we will not find our way out. People were not born lawyers, judges, police officers, politicians, or even kings. It took years of training to build up the skills to be able to perform these roles in this play that we call society. As William Shakespeare said so beautifully in his All the World's a Stage, quote, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages." For me, I find this to be literally true when it comes to describing our participation in the fictional realm. The stage is this highly complex scene staged in the minds of men. If we don't like this play, we can exit stage left. This play was created by those who wear the costumes and play the roles of kings and popes so that they can continue to rule their empires, fight their wars, control the population, and obtain great wealth and power. The directors are the people hiding behind the scenes who have obtained great wealth and control as a result. Their motives, ethics, and morals must be highly scrutinized. The actors in this play go through lots of training to learn how to play their part, including you and I. This play is not designed to ensure prosperity for all. It was designed to enslave the unwitting participants through complex language and force if needed. We do not direct this play, so we cannot change it. This play is not broken. It is highly controlled by the directors. We continue to participate because we have been hoodwinked into believing that we are the actor that we are playing. Ask most people who they are, and the first words out of their mouth would be the job they do. People identify with the fictional construct they grew up learning how to perform. Lawyer, doctor, accountant, engineer, whatever. That is not who we are, but rather what we do. How many famous actors do you know of that identify themselves with the character they played in the movies? You don't see Harrison Ford walking around introducing himself as Han Solo or Indiana Jones, do you? So why do we identify with our roles in life? It's easy to see the fictional realm once it's pointed out. You know you're dealing with the fiction when somebody else defines the words you ensure. You know you are dealing with the fiction when somebody else defines the words to ensure you comprehend their story and the role you are playing. You will also be able to see that the vast majority of the actors also wear costumes, robes, uniforms, suits, etc., are all used to communicate the position being played. It is time that we exit stage left, write, produce, direct, and act in our own play. Our mind is ours to command, rather than having others do it for us. Utilizing the powerful capacity to create in our imagination, to manifest what we are looking for in our own lives. An opportunity to make a difference in our world. All it takes is the courage to pick up the pen and start writing and defining our own lives in our own play. Chapter 3, Physical Realm. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Genesis 1:1. There are literally thousands of different stories over history that explain how the earth came to be. The question of how the physical realm manifested has been argued for thousands of years. The debate continues today with recent news articles talking about how physicists may have evidence that the universe is actually a computer simulation. There seems to be a great divide between people in regards to how this whole physical realm came to be. For me, I have no doubt that the physical realm was created by the Spirit. Everything that exists physically is formed by and bound to Spirit. Despite how it got here or whether it's real or not, we still face the truth of this existence. We exist, we are here, and what do we do about it? I find it difficult to talk about each realm without bringing the other two into the discussion, as the relationship between all three is so close and interwoven. The last chapter talked about the fictional realm and how it's manifested from the mind. Some would argue that whatever our mind conceives, it is real, and as such forms a part of the physical world. I disagree. I think what the individual is able to create in their own mind is their own interpretation, and as such, the individual creates their own world in their mind. We all have our own separate and unique view and interpretation of our life, this physical world, and how we interact with it all. Our views are separate from the actual physical world upon which we live, as it is merely an interpretation based on personal experiences, knowledge, bias, thoughts, and feelings. That is why we struggle so much to communicate with one another, as each and every single one of us has a different view and interpretation of the world upon which we live. We struggle because we don't see or understand each other's world, and we fail to communicate our views. The fictional constructs we create in our mind can influence the physical world, but only through our actions, beliefs, and behaviors, as our mind has a very close relationship and impact on our physical body. It is the will and expression of spirit that has the biggest impact and manifestation in this physical world, as it allows for the creative force that created the physical world to alter and manifest new physical realities. Either way, the physical body and its environment seems to be the central focus of our current manifestation. Our physical body was manifested by the fusion of body and spirit within our mother. It may have required a male and female act to start the physical process, but it also required spiritual intervention to make a viable fetus. That fetus grew with nutrients that came from the earth. It is the parents, grandparents, friends, and family who are all responsible for raising the baby to maturity. I'm not just talking about physical maturity, but also emotional, mental, and spiritual maturity as well. The physical maturity is very much a natural and automatic process. The body can pretty much take care of that itself. All it needs is food, water, shelter, and clothing. At times it gets sick, so some intervention is required, but for the most part, the physical growth is all automatic. The biggest challenge for the parents that requires active and conscious participation is with the mental, emotional, and spiritual growth. Until the child is mature enough on all four levels, he or she will always remain dependent and will never achieve full independence. If the child cannot achieve full independence, then he or she will not be able to participate in the bounty, joy, and love of a healthy interdependent relationship. Many people fail to achieve full independence and as such end up in codependent relationships. Most parents use a very simple concept to help raise their children. The premise is based on the idea that parents provide benefits and privileges to the children to encourage wanted behavior, and they use consequences such as withdrawal of benefits and privileges, up to and including the use of force, to discourage unwanted behavior. The reality of the situation that most parents quickly realize is that the child has free will of his or her own. Ever try to control or reason with a 2-year-old during a temper tantrum? Just makes the situation worse or ends up in complete failure if a parent tries logical reasoning with a child who is behaving irrationally. However, force may be necessary at times in order to protect the child from harming his or herself. They don't have the emotional or mental maturity to fully comprehend the consequences of their actions. So they can be a danger to themselves due to their own ignorance and lack of maturity. This process requires fine-tuning and many thousands of hours of dedication to raise a child to maturity. Many books have been written about the subject. The point I want to make here is that if the parent fails to bring all 4 aspects of the child to maturity, then the child will be dependent upon others until he or she can bring some level of maturity into their lives themselves, if they're even consciously aware of the dependencies that they have. In our current world situation, this is where the fictional realm comes into play. The problem that I see is that the vast majority of people have not been raised to any significant level of maturity, especially in the emotional and spiritual aspect of being. Because of that, most people then find other parents to provide some level of benefits and privileges in order to survive. When the child moves away from home, that new parent usually ends up being the state, which is a fictional entity. If the individual was emotionally and spiritually mature, they would naturally reject the fictional entity and instead recognize the spirit and govern themselves. The state is a parent to all the children that are dependent upon it, and it uses the same model for raising children as biological parents use: benefits and privileges. Although the biological parent's intent was to raise the child to independence, the state is very much interested in maintaining dependency. The child most times will leave the biological parents and engage the fictional parent using their own free will to sign up for benefits and privileges. Some examples of those benefits are employment insurance, pensions, or health care. Some examples of privileges range from driver's licenses, voting, passports, or any form of licensing requirements. And just like a biological parent, the state will engage in force to protect the child because they are deemed vulnerable and needing protection. Misbehave and they withdraw benefits and privileges. What if the child could take the necessary steps to gain full maturity on a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual level? Would there be any requirement to have a parent, biological or fictional, to provide for the well-being of the individual? Would the parents have or owe any duty to the child at that point either? In nature, the young must become independent or perish. It is a harsh reality with all other life on this planet. I believe that in order to complete the process of growing up, it requires that we all achieve full independence from all parents on all levels of being: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. The challenge is that there are very few, if any, who are truly 100% independent people out there. There are few parents out there that can raise children to this level of maturity. We live in a world where the parents are children themselves. Even the people who wear the masks of the state are children, and that would explain why they behave like children too. The level of maturity being displayed in most provincial, state, or federal assemblies is appalling and very telling of how much maturity the individuals themselves have actually achieved. So, in order to accomplish a balanced level of maturity through all 4 states of being: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, a significant amount of work must be done. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge is a quote from Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. Destroyed for lack of knowledge. Let's get to work In January 2012, I asked myself an important question. Am I a man searching for spiritual enlightenment, or am I a soul or spiritual being having a physical experience? I then went through a thought experiment where I challenged myself in regards to the morality or the mortality of both. With my current belief structure, I believe that the physical body will last for 80 to 100 years, give or take a few years. Could be much sooner if I don't look after it. However, the spirit most likely existed long before the body was born, and it will exist long after the body is gone too. So given the immortality of the spirit, I came to the conclusion that the essence of who I am is not rooted in the body, but rather is rooted in the spirit. That whole thought process significantly changed the whole outlook of who I am. Is it possible then that the body is nothing more than a vessel for the spirit to express itself and experience what mortality is like? How else could an immortal being learn how it feels or what it means to be mortal without fully immersing itself? The implications are significant, as I quickly realized that I'm not a physical man, but rather I'm a spirit in possession of a physical body. As such, it is my duty to be a good steward of that physical vessel. If I don't take good care of it, then the amount of experiences I can have here are going to be very limited. The other big realization for me came in the form of my fear of death. Once I realized that when the vessel dies, the essence of who I am continues on, then in reality, I cannot die. The vessel dies, and it will then be returned to the earth from where it came, but the spirit moves on. This is where a huge paradox comes into play, and this is where scripture really helped me out to make the transition in how I view who I am. What I realized is that an undisciplined mind can be harmful for the body and spirit. For if ye live after the flesh, ye shall die. But if ye through the Spirit do mortify the deeds of the body, ye shall live. Romans 8:13.